This debate is coming up more and more often, and I think ties into the question of just who these rebels are in Libya. It's difficult, of course, to study them now in the midst of the fighting, but investigative journalist Webster Tarpley says we can get some clues from history. And Webster, you talk about this study that was done back in 2007 by West Point. It basically looked into the background of some of the guerrilla fighters crossing the border from Syria into Iraq. Talk about what was learned in that study and how it relates to today.
The story, as you say, is that in about 2007, the U.S. forces captured the al-Qaeda personnel files in that critical Syria-Iraq border area. And they got about 600 or 700 personnel files. So they did a study. Where did they come from? It turned out that the absolute world capital of sending jihadis, terrorists, according to the U.S. definition, into Iraq was the city of Darna. And Darna, of course, is about halfway between Benghazi and Tobruk. It's the heartland of the entire rebel area that the U.S. is now rushing to protect. They did a study of which country had sent the most, and it turned out that Libya was the champion per unit of population. Libya beat Saudi Arabia, the closest contender, by almost 2 to 1. And of the Libyans who had gone in, again, all from this northeast Cyrenaica area, Benghazi, Darna, Tobruk, the ones who had gone to Iraq, 85% of them were suicide bombers. They indicated their preference on their card. Now, this is more than just speculation. Readers of the London Daily Telegraph on Saturday, and indeed of the Italian business paper Il Sole 24 Ore, a couple of days before that, can find an interview with the commander of Darna. His name is Hasidi, and he is a former U.S. POW, Admiral Stavridis. If he's looking for flickers, he ought to look in his own records of people who have been held by the U.S., either in Pakistan or maybe at Guantanamo Bay. Hasidi was captured by the U.S. as a jihadi, was held by the U.S., and he's now the commander of Darna. He says he sent 25 fighters to Iraq and Afghanistan. How many U.S. forces did they kill, those people that we're now supposed to defend?
I know you've made a couple different historical connections here. Another one, you talk about President Reagan arming the Afghan Mujahideen. You say that this is not so far off from what's going on with the rebels in Libya right now, with the weapons coming in from Saudi Arabia, coming in from Egypt. Talk about that connection and why it's significant. Well,
it's going on in Yemen, and it's going on in Libya right now. Same thing. In other words, the U.S. is too poor to have ground troops. So we can send in some air cover, but the infantry of the U.S. is now al-Qaeda, or Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, to be precise, which merged with al-Qaeda. Go back to 1995, the David Shaler affair. This was a defector, a whistleblower from MI5, who said that MI6 had paid a al-Qaeda organization in Libya 100,000 pounds to try to kill Gaddafi. And that was linked to the last insurrection in 95-96, precisely from Benghazi and Tobruk.
So if al-Qaeda is enemies with Gaddafi, does that make, in this situation, al-Qaeda our friends?
Absolutely not. Suppose you get these crazies, because that's the only way to put it, psychotics, fanatics, misfits, terrorists, whatever they are. You're going to give them modern arms. You're going to give them a slice of those $32 billion. You're going to give them the oil revenue. They'll create a terrorist power that will go wild across the world. Governments around the world need to ask the United States, what are you doing arming and promoting al-Qaeda fighters in those areas of Libya? The other angle on this is the tribal makeup. In other words, it's primarily the Harabi and the Obeidat tribes that go with al-Qaeda. That's the Libyan Benghazi Rebel Council. Those people are racists. They hate black people. And you've noticed there have been atrocities by the rebels against black Africans and against black Libyans. If you were from Mali or from Chad and you were in Benghazi, Darna, Tobruk, you had a very good chance of being slaughtered, literally lynched in many cases. Of the Gaddafi tribes, the pro-Gaddafi tribes being the Kaddafa, the Magahira, the Wafala, and the Fezan. The Fezan are black or very dark. They might be massacred. If that rebel army gets into western Libya, we're going to have a genocide of black people presided over by Obama and Susan Rice.
So you're saying, to one extent, there's a chance that the rebels that are getting armed right now with the help of U.S. allies, you're saying that there's a chance that as this goes down the road, that they could start hanging people from the sides of the road just as Gaddafi did.
They've already done it. In other words, the reporting was all slanted against Gaddafi, but Africans were lynched by the rebels when they took over in those areas. So it's supposedly an intervention to protect civilians, and it's preparing a genocide, similar to the Bay of Pigs, right? Remember that the CIA sent a secret army into Cuba in 1961, and they failed, just as these Libyans have failed. Allen Dulles went to Kennedy and said, give me airstrikes and give me ground forces. Kennedy said, no, I won't, and you're fired. Obama, in the same situation, has said, send in the forces.
Real quick, Webster, I want to ask you about Qamis Gaddafi. I believe it's Muammar Gaddafi's sixth son. Some reports saying he's been killed, some saying he hasn't. A powerful force was in America just last month, I believe, on a tour. Was greeted by the State Department. What do you think about all this? He's
the commander of the 32nd Brigade, some kind of an elite unit. And we're told the other night that the U.S. submarines shot about 25 or 30 cruise missiles at $1 million a pop at the headquarters of the 32nd Brigade. They apparently didn't get him because Qamis has been on television. A lot of gloating on Al Jazeera and on the internet about Qamis. He seems to be alive and well and fighting back.
Certainly a lot of interesting stuff going on in Libya. As always, great to have you. Investigative journalist Webster Tarpley.